There's been a lot of attention on increasing mental health resources at the state and national level in recent years. But are these efforts missing something essential that would actually help prevent suicide?
He always says, thank you for saving my life. And I'm like, bro, there's 2 lives. Thank you for saving mine. 2 lives were saved that day. So powerful experience, super powerful.
On this episode, we sit down with the leader of a local nonprofit who offers a way to help men struggling with mental health challenges in a way that he says can't be found in any of the government-funded mental health resources. This is Defending Ideas. Defending Ideas is a weekly podcast produced by Sutherland Institute. On this show, we are committed to renewing the principles of common sense conservatism, making you a better champion of sound ideas. This year, Sutherland Institute is celebrating its 30th anniversary, thanks to all those who support the work we do for Utah and our great nation. Welcome back to another episode of Defending Ideas. I'm Nic Dunn, and we're joined once again by Beth Akers, a contributor here at Defending Ideas and a senior fellow at AEI. Beth, welcome back.
Thanks. Glad to be back.
Beth, the conversation today is really interesting because we sat down with a guy named Joe Tuia'ana, who founded and runs a group called the I Love You Bro Project. So we're talking about the context of the conversations we've been having about the challenges facing men and boys. This week specifically diving into mental health and suicide prevention. But the conversation we're about to play for our audience, it felt different than the other ones. And to be honest, I'm still kind of thinking through what that means for our broader efforts on this issue.
Yeah, for the listeners who've been following along, I think this is a really natural next conversation in this series. We've kind of tackled this question about boys and men, starting from like a really technical lens, the workforce, higher ed, looking at data. And then it's kind of evolved into, I think, a space that maybe is a bit outside of our comfort zone as policy professionals, but in a way that feels really true to solving the issue. And so the conversation with Joe is really powerful, really vulnerable, and I think leads us in the direction I think we're going to find a lot of the answers for how to really start tackling a lot of the challenges that men and boys are facing.
I think you're right, and I think it touches on something that maybe often gets missed in some of these conversations. That the way I describe it when I talk to folks about what this kind of broader project of helping to understand and address some of the challenges that men and boys face, we've talked a lot about kind of 3 buckets of health, vocation, and purpose, and it's easy to kind of describe the health and vocation buckets because health with a special focus on mental health, as we're going to talk about today, pretty self-explanatory. Vocation, when we look at educational attainment rates and work rates and different job opportunities, again, there's lots of data. That's kind of to your point, a normal place for public policy discussions to happen. But then the way I describe it is the third bucket of purpose is the most nebulous, but also the most important more and more. And that's one thing that it seems like with some of the other conversations we've had that, to your point, we have a lot of great data and great analysis to try and understand what's going on. But I think in a lot of those conversations, increasingly, it kind of ends up at this place of purpose. And, men in some of the data just kind of feel adrift and disconnected and at times lonely. And as we'll talk about today, sometimes that manifests in some really tough ways. That, I guess, emotional or moral or societal component is kind of new for a public policy focus on this issue.
That's right. It's sort of, we don't have this tool set, right? Go, be vulnerable, connect, do the things that we know are going to improve, your sense of purpose. It's like, well, how do we do that? It seems like a daunting ask, but I think we are absolutely learning in this process, and Joe sheds a lot of light on how we can do that.
Absolutely. And the one thing I'll mention, and maybe we can jump into the interview, is that I view this kind of through the lens of some of the previous conversations we've had about the importance of civic institutions that can provide some of that connection and genuine relationships and mentoring. We talked about that with Sam Abrams recently, that this is sort of another illustration of why those things are important and should happen a little bit more organically than maybe we typically think.
Absolutely. And, like you said, this is the tricky part. And on one, because we don't have a tremendous number of policy tools that, offer immediate solutions to how do you give people purpose. But also, I think the mechanisms that we do know of can feel controversial to talk about in a public policy space. I mean, I find community at my church, but it doesn't really work to go out and have the governor say everyone should go join a church. For a lot of reasons, that's not the right answer, even though a lot of us believe it is for us personally. And so I think this gives a more broader sense of knowledge on, the lessons that are coming or the values that are coming from community in these other sorts of institutions, as you just described. So I think it's a good one.
Spot on. Well, with that, let's go ahead and jump into our interview on this week's episode of Defending Ideas with Joe Tuia'ana from the I Love You Bro project. Joining us now in the studio is Joe Tuia'ana. Joe is the founder of the I Love You Bro project. Joe, thanks so much for being with us on Defending Ideas.
No, thank you for having me. I love being here.
Well, we're excited to talk to you because Beth and I have been having these conversations about issues affecting men and boys for the last few months now in a number of different spheres. And we've looked at, higher education and workforce and purpose and kind of all these different aspects of some of the data trends showing some concerning aspects of what some men and boys are going through. I think this is going to be one of the most important conversations because it's focusing on the issue of mental health and suicide prevention specifically. And some of the data shows that that's a big problem for these men who struggle. And so I wonder if maybe we could start, Joe. Can you just sort of tell us the origin of the I Love You Bro project? You've done this in press interviews, kind of I've been calling it with you sort of the Lehigh overpass moment. Maybe start there and we can talk about what led to this organization that you now run.
Yeah, so back in 2022, just my daughters and I were on our way to a basketball game, something we do every Saturday, school athletics. And just happened to notice a man in a suicide crisis on the overpass that is on the way. Pulled behind him, pulled over, and told my oldest daughter, you call the police, and told the other two to kind of just chill in the back. And the dad's got this moment kind of a thing. Opened the door, closed the door, and I thought I was gonna throw up, and then I thought I was gonna pass out. One of those situations. The gravity of something like that, you just can't comprehend until you see it on the TV and on in movies. But I said a quick prayer, just please, Lord, let this guy know that he's loved. And it's not like I had this water into wine situation, but I had a little boost of confidence. Then I had the feeling to just open my arms to him, like I wanted to give him a hug. And I was thinking, man, I just looking like me, being as big and just being me, I could make this worse. And so that's when I did open my arms to him and started slowly walking towards him, saying, and I started shouting, actually, "I love you, bro." And those are the only words that I could say during the whole sequence of this experience. And I repeated it over and over, and he was able to hear me. Finally, got directly beneath him, and he started choosing, looking between, me and the great beyond. And I had some inspiration to jump up and grab him and lifted him over this protective fence and slid down to the safety of the sidewalk there on the overpass and just sat and cried with him and just told him, "I love you, bro," over and over, and had this really powerful moment with him. Just a dude, and at that point I was 2 weeks sober, functioning alcoholic, and about ready to, I had double pneumonia, I was about ready to go back to that life in the dark. And this, years later, of course, he's my new little brother. And he always says, thank you for saving my life. And I'm like, bro, there's 2 lives. Thank you for saving mine. 2 lives were saved that day. So powerful experience, super powerful.
What did that lead to? I guess, how did that experience, influence you? You've obviously now gone on to create this organization, but can you connect some dots of that is an incredibly compelling and powerful experience, but kind of what happened next?
Yeah. So I invited him, he found me actually, saw the story, went crazy viral. I was on Fox News and MSNBC and doing all these interviews. He sees his own story on the news. And so he reaches out to me through Facebook Messenger. We have him and his little son over and his mom and to have dinner. And then I just gave him, a couple hours to just talk. And he just happened to be a normal dude who had a few terrible things happen in a short period of time, and which is actually consistent with a lot of our guys who come in with suicide ideation. Anyway, we Googled some resources for him, and together we were searching, what can I do to help? And we just found nothing. We found some good campaigns with, partners of our, like the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI, great things out there, but nothing specific for men. And so we also found the same research that men were near 80% of all suicides, 80. And it was shocking to me. And so from there, that's what really moved me to start doing something. And I know I have a pretty good personality. I can talk pretty well with people. I think I can get a couple friends together, some family maybe, just to help him, and get him some connection. And I did. I started just with a small group and, doing this with him. And it suddenly started having more and more guys show up to this, and word of mouth started spreading. And from there. And so since then, that's what I do now, man. That's what I love.
Joe, you glossed right over it there. You said this magic word, connection. And I think many of us would feel small in that moment, thinking, what can I do? What gift do I have that I could, share with the world to address this really huge problem? But you had this insight or an instinct that it was connection that was missing, and that's what you've really built on, right?
Yeah. And what I've come to find is what Aaron needed is what we do at the Love You Bro Project. We address his needs, and his needs just happen to match the needs of the men in our community. And so what he needed was a trusted connection, not just someone he could connect to, but a trusted one. Those are two different things. You can feel connected to someone, but it'd be very shallow. But he didn't have a trusted relationship with his emotions. And second, he didn't have any, knowledge to help himself. Really, and obviously he didn't have really any money like a lot of us to go to therapy and to talk about some of those things. And so what I've found is men specifically, we need connection and we need purpose, those two things. I could say I love you, bro, all the live long day to some of these guys, but they feel it more when they can find those two things in my presence, connection and purpose. So,
can you talk about, you mentioned that as you sat with him, kind of looking to see what was out there, feeling like there wasn't really much, and I know there are various suicide prevention and mental health resources that exist. Why did it feel like what you were searching for him in that instance, you couldn't really find a resource to address that? Can you talk more about kind of the lack of resources that felt like it would have helped in that circumstance?
Well, we are in a society of intervention, crisis intervention. And to me, what I've learned is that we funnel so much money into intervention when it needs to be in prevention. And so when we're talking about funding, when we're talking about opportunities for men to start opening up, Aaron needed a space to be able to start talking and to be able to open up freely in front of specifically other men, and to build some of that connection. What's out there currently is we have a lot of wonderful crisis intervention. We need to have more prevention intervention. Our funding needs to go more towards those things. So that there doesn't have to be a freaking overpass story. There shouldn't have to be one. Yes, those things are inevitable. Sure, you can say that. But in Aaron's case, and in many men's cases, many people's cases, we need more funding towards the prevention of an overpass story, and less on, it's gotten so bad that we need to now address that rather than way before that. So
it reminds me, a few years ago in a different work capacity, I was working for the Salt Lake Chamber, and we were doing some work around suicide prevention in the business community. And I remember just working with some of the folks at the state in that capacity. There's this analogy of if you're standing on a riverbank and you see somebody floating by who's drowning, struggling to keep their head above water, and you think, well, I should dive in and grab them and bring them to shore. And then let's say you do that, and then another person, and then another person, another person. If more and more people are floating down this river really struggling, the analogy is that at some point you would say, well, I'm going to go upstream and figure out what's going on. And if other people are like, where are you going? We need to rescue people from the water. And you would say, well, I need to go find out why they're falling in. Does that analogy kind of capture what this moment for you of we need something different in our society?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm doing is, it's been done and is being done. Support groups are out there. There's so much stigma around just the word support group, but the way we are doing it is a little different. It's still the guy on an overpass, just a dude, a recovering alcoholic, and then there's another dude who's suffering from suicide ideation. And there's a moment there that they share that there's some connection, and then just love and transparency there, and a peace found there. And I think what I found is that the simplicity of what the I Love You Bro project offers and how we do it is what makes us so valuable. We're just average Joes for average bros, and we really lean into that. And so, yeah, now that we have something that's almost like blue collar, hard hat lunch bucket feels, so to speak, that's what we lean into, because that's the majority of the guys that are coming in.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to get more into kind of the model and what you described of sort of the way we're doing it is different. I want to get into some of that for our audience so they can understand what about this is unique and is having an impact. So we're going to take a quick break. Again, this is Defending Ideas. Stick around.
Sutherland Institute is an independent, nonprofit public policy think tank based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Our mission is to defend the principles of the American founding and strengthen the institutions of civil society essential for those principles to endure. Sutherland provides research, events, and multimedia to policymakers and the public to promote the principles of faith, family, freedom, opportunity, and responsibility. Visit sutherlandinstitute.org.
Welcome back to Defending Ideas. I'm Nic Dunn with Beth Akers, and we're going to continue our conversation with Joe Tuia'ana of the I Love You Bro project, diving into the issue of men's mental health and some of the resources that are out there today, and maybe some areas we can think about improving the system. Before we keep going with the conversation, I want to remind you, if you like what you're hearing today, make sure to subscribe to Defending Ideas wherever you like to get your shows. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Sutherland Institute YouTube channel and click the little bell icon in the corner so you get notified each time a new episode drops, which is every Tuesday morning. You can find all of that and more at defendingideas.org, or just search for us wherever you get your shows. Joe, you mentioned something before the break about this idea of the way we're doing things is different. I wonder if you can talk about, we heard kind of the story of what started all this and led to, well, we have to sort of create this organization to give structure around this. Can you talk about what is the model? What does the I Love You Bro project do, first of all? And second of all, why does it seem different in your eyes from other things that are out there?
Yeah, so foundationally, the I Love You Bro project, we really lean into our weekly support group. So we offer spaces for men to come and share. They're only an hour and a half. Every one of them is 7:30 to 9 p.m. So we're consistent and we're weekly with these support groups. Our, I would say, secondary programs would be, we have monthly mental health workshops for men, where I bring in clinicians and we address what our data shows, and we also offer social connection activities outside of a clinical space. We give guys an opportunity to connect, have fun, kind of do those activities, and then we also offer free therapy for men as well. And so, what's different? It's a really awesome question. Is we lean into just normal average Joes for average bros. What I did is, I looked at what NAMI and the AFSP and other current groups, what they were doing, their model, and as far as our support groups, and AA and some of these other SA groups that are very popular, and that we think of when we think of support groups. You think, a lot of people think, oh, it's Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever. They all have really wonderful qualities about them. The one thing that I think that we're different at is, first, that all of these groups are led by just average Joes. And so we give some simple QPR certification, suicide prevention certification. These guys go through some simple I love you, bro mentorship training with me, which really is just to facilitate conversation and help guys navigate some of their thoughts and whatnot, and just to be able to open up a little bit more. And then our group essentially is just, normal guys coming in. We don't have a dedicated, I would say, a life challenge, like an AA or an SA. They are specifically for men with facing a variety of challenges and who have a catalog of different emotions that they're experiencing. And so we don't have a specific thing. And what we offer there is simple. It's just love, connection, and through those two things, we're finding hope. Guys are finding hope and fulfillment. In fact, our number one, the number one reason our data shows guys who come is for connection, a safe place to share. 78% of them. And what we're saying is our retention rate, though, per guy is 76%. So if they come one more time, they will come one more time. There's, I should say, a 76% chance they'll come one more time within 30 days. And the reason for that second visit is because they want opportunities to help other men there. So we know guys are finding connection, and they're also finding fulfillment. And so, having 7 weekly support groups throughout Utah, there's no chance that I could do this on my own. And so who are they led by? They're led by guys dudes who are broken guys who've found purpose in what we're doing. And they were like, I want to do more. I want more. What can I do? And so they start leading out groups for us, anyway. So we're doing a lot of awesome things, very simple. So,
Joe, you mentioned this idea that there's maybe a stigma attached to going to a support group, like we don't want to need that help, and I wonder if some of it comes from the idea that, we believe we're supposed to have this sort of community, this sort of connection, like organically in our life. But it seems like a lot of people don't. And, you're identifying that and kind of filling in what is really absent. I mean, is that your sense that men are just lacking this? And why? Why is this not happening organically in our lives?
Well, I mean, we know right now that men are 80% of all suicides. Well, why is that? Just within the I Love You, mind you, our data that we collect are from men who are somewhat comfortable reaching out. So it doesn't necessarily reflect all men who may not be. And so from what the data we collect from our guys is only, I would say, 21% of them were comfortable reaching out to 988, which is the National Crisis Hotline. Okay, that's what we provide, right? And the reason why that is because our data shows self-perception, negative self-talk, the judgment of others, clearly the number one. But what's sad and also interesting is that men, the least comfortable outlet they have, according to our data, is a spouse. Only 13% of them will say, I want to reach out. I would reach out in an emotional crisis to my wife. 15% would reach out to other family, parents, siblings, cousins. And then a very sad one for me, 18%. In the community that we live in, a religious one, only 18% would feel comfortable even talking to God about their problems, prayer. And so we know that the stigma, it holds up, that men are supposed to be this tough, suck it up, lions, not sheep mentality. That's just so toxic that we have trouble breaking down some of those walls and that stigma in the group. So,
can I share some data points that kind of back up what you're saying? Here at Settle Institute, we put a survey in the field to survey American men across a range of issues on health, vocation, but also purpose, to kind of get at the sense of what are they feeling and experiencing as kind of that experiential data that in many respects is missing from these conversations. And so this is all American men. It's just a kind of a general sample of American men. And in our findings, I'm going to read from a report that I'll link to in the show notes. A whopping 36% of American men say they are struggling to understand my place in my community or in broader society. 31% said they, quote, don't have anyone close to me with whom I can speak about difficult things I am dealing with. And when we asked about mental health specifically, almost a third said that they don't have a close confidant. So 30% reporting that they don't have anyone they can talk to about their own mental health. And that includes things like a mental health professional or a spouse or partner. And it was about roughly between 1 in 5 and 1 in 3 who said that talking to my spouse or a mental health professional about this would be a sign of weakness. And so some of the national data kind of bolsters what you're seeing. I want to drill in a little bit more, or drill down to this idea that average Joes, to use your term, are the folks leading these conversations. Given the survey data, what you've experienced in your organization, why do you think it's so important that average guys are the ones leading these conversations instead of, trained clinical health professionals in some form?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're men are programmed from a very young age. We're robots when it comes to emotions. Even me, to an extent, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I have no problem sharing my emotions, but there are still times, as a pre-programmed automaton when it comes to emotions, where we've been raised and dedicated to do X, Y, Z, and oh wait, now there's something after I'm feeling this when I'm doing that. We're not programmed. We don't have the programming, I should say, to process a lot of that. So when I include a clinician in my weekly support group, say it's a man, one of my board clinicians, that changes the vibe, if you will, of the group. And when you're talking about average Joes, we know that Joe, he's a recovering alcoholic. We know that Joe's a single dad. He struggles with this, and this, okay? In the clinical world, these clinicians are, one of our rules is, take the mask off when you come in. That dad mask, that gym bro mask, all of those masks, the business bro masks that weigh us down. Let's talk real here. Let's be real. And clinicians are, they're trained to not do that, actually. And so it's difficult for me to have my board clinicians attend without being the clinician. And so just like having a woman in our support groups, guys will tend to be more reserved and put on more of that mask and stuff. The clinician's the same way. These guys know that that's their job. They're professional. They're going to dissect what I say. They're going to judge me on what I say. And so it holds up between the stigma between just opening up to a spouse compared to opening up to my therapist. When I have right now the outcomes that we've seen with the I Love You Bro project, clearly we're number one. We're at 82% of our men choose us to reach out to. Right after that is a friend outside of the I Love You Bro project. And then there's a big chasm between third and down. But we know is because of these guys who are simple, not clinicians, and they're not clinical. They're imperfect like our attendees.
They can sort of model the vulnerability that you think will be healing for these men, or has proven to be healing for these men.
And they're totally open with it. Our invitation's always open up, share, and we'll get one guy who comes in who, for the first time, who is not comfortable, but he showed up. That's a miracle. And so I'm like, hey, maybe next time, bro, it's nice to meet you. Give these guys a hug. Maybe next time. We'll talk a little bit more. And it does. You see an ice melting on the outside of picking, chopping down pre-programmed walls, ice walls, so to speak, with these guys. So we we have to lean into that. We're just brothally broken, and attendees can feel that difference where they don't want to be spoken down to. We don't want to be, we want to stay in control of everything, We're control freaks about that stuff. But to see a leader come in, the group leader, and be able to be vulnerable and lead with that, oh my gosh, there's so much value in being able to have that. And it's not a clinician. It's not someone of, it's not my, parents. It's someone who, I've seen a video where you just talk to a complete stranger way more openly than you talk to your own friends and family. And so our places are ones where we're building what I call 2 a.m. bros, 2 a.m. friendships.
Yeah.
Where when you are struggling, these are emotional connections these guys are making. I may not be watching a ball game with them over the weekend, but I know when I'm wanting to drink or if I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I have trusted connections that I've made within these groups that are just other dudes too, just trying to hang in there with me. And so there is, again, so much value just being normal guys, imperfect, broken. I'll say it over and over. This bend not break mentality is toxic. No, you can break, bro. Then what happens when our guys break? Oh, then I'm not supposed to break. So that means I'm faulty. That's what ended up with Aaron being on an overpass. He just had a couple things said to him and done to him and experienced, and he had no way to process such heavy things. Well, then there must be something wrong with me then if I'm feeling this. So there's no value in my life in living. And so that's what took him to the overpass. And every single one, right now we're at about a 11% suicide ideation rate within our group. So relatively few compared to if I have a group of 10 guys, one of them is probably suffering from some passive or aggressive, suicide ideation. All of them are attached to shame. All of them. There might be loneliness, shame. Grief, shame along with that. Pornography addiction, shame along with that. Shame is the number one challenge our guys are experiencing right now. When they can select all the things they're experiencing, shame is something close to 80% of all of them, that they talk negatively about themselves, they think negatively, and it reinforces the negative side of every single one of those challenges, that it's attached to. And that's the same thing Aaron was experiencing. And guess what? That's the same thing that all of us are experiencing. And with men, we take it super personal. We feel like we don't bring value to this world because we're attaching it to a job, attaching it to the way we look, to our house and our income, things of that nature. And so when someone says, or, we're fired from a job and say our wife leaves us, suddenly we bring no value. And that is consistent between all of these guys that come into through our programs. It is a consistency. So,
Joe, we need to take one final break, but I want to ask you when we come back about kind of broader lessons we can take from this, because I'm hearing all this, and Beth, it's making me think of all the other conversations we've had on this broad topic. But Joe, when we come back, I want to ask you about what are key takeaways for all of us who care about this issue as a state, as a nation. Are there things that we need to be doing differently as a society in terms of how we think about mental health resources, in particular for men? So I want to get into kind of some of those bigger lessons and maybe how to take what you've learned and help it have a broader impact to move the needle on this. So we'll dive into that when we come back. Again, this is Defending Ideas. We'll be right back, so please stick around.
For a deeper dive into the issues you care about, read Sutherland Institute's official blog, Insights and Takeaways. You'll gain deep insights from policy experts and relevant takeaways voters need to know. Visit sutherlandinstitute.org.
Welcome back to Defending Ideas. I'm Nic Dunn with Beth Akers, and we've been talking with Joe Tuia'ana of the I Love You Bro project and about the issues that men are facing in the world of mental health, and want to dive into that conversation, talk about lessons we can learn to apply to some of these bigger conversations we're having. But first, I want to remind you, if you like what you're hearing today, make sure to subscribe to Defending Ideas wherever you get your shows. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the Sutherland Institute YouTube channel and click the little bell icon in the corner to get notified each time a new episode drops, which is every Tuesday morning. All of that and more at defendingideas.org or wherever you get your shows. Joe, let's go ahead and jump back in, because there's some things we want to talk about, again, the broader lessons we can learn from all this.
Yeah, Joe, the thing that's striking to me about what you're doing is that you have a very particular culture that you're bringing to this project. And I think, we've all been reading for years, like vulnerability is healing, vulnerability is empowering, connection is important. But when I go out into the world and say, go, be vulnerable, connect, that doesn't work, right? But there's some magic in what you're doing. The authenticity that you bring to this project, I think, is modeling something that's powerful for the men who participate. And I think it's beautiful and also a little bit worrying, because I think this is a bigger problem than you can solve with I Love You Bro and just the group, the fantastic group that you've created. I mean, how do we take these ideas bigger when it does rely so much on, that you really creating a special space.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I always say my advice for people, women, parents, is creating the right space is so much more powerful than saying the right thing ever. And so when we're talking about creating space for men, creating emotional space, when we create our spaces for these guys to come in and share, and then they use our groups as practice fields to start opening up. And then the idea would be that they take what they learned and apply it in their life with their relationships at home and with their kids. And then that space, hopefully, wouldn't it be, ideal for our homes to be a support group?
Yeah.
That certainly is the case for me. And to think that guys are out there who don't have that kind of emotional space or, in their relationships, that they can do that, it breaks my heart. So at the same time, as far as a community, what I know is working and what we're doing and creating these spaces. So it is my opinion that every community, if it could be multiple, should have access to a space for men that is dedicated. It is dedicated. That's what we do there, is share. And these spaces, again, when we're talking about the culture, we're just practicing here, bros. We're just practicing. And then guess what? This should hopefully help you share at home. And then when you have an army of these support groups that are consistently, weekly consistently, showing up with these guys, and this new reprogramming is happening, then you have guys going home that are a little bit more comfortable. In fact, we have our data shows that we're at 75% of the men feel that their attendance and participation has helped their relationships at home.
That's fantastic.
And so 75% is a great,
Yes.
I think we're at 68% saying that they have a better outlook on life because of their attendance. So when you're talking about what can we do as a community, I can't force vulnerability.
Right.
I can't do that. For women especially, they're in a tight spot when it comes to men's mental health. They're in a tight spot. We know women should be vulnerable because that's what they do, right? That's their programming. But for men, that's not part of their programming. This is not connecting. And so that reprogramming it needs to be so consistent and so persistent, but comfortably. And it has to come from a man. It has to come from a dude. Other guys showing vulnerability, me being vulnerable with these guys here, it gives them an unspoken permission to become vulnerable themselves. And it's not a permission that women can offer, that they have the power to offer. It's been, in my experience. And so when we have multiple spaces, free access to them for men to come with real guys, talk about real stuff in a non-clinical fashion, not necessarily organized and follow-up care and all this stuff, you get miracles happening. And, it's almost like a campfire, with the guys that we offer. So as a community, we absolutely do need spaces more regularly, well placed. Our goal has always been 20-minute drive. It needs to be less than that. That's just me. Okay, I'm not going to drive 20 minutes to get to a group, so I don't expect other guys. So that means we need to have groups within 20 minutes of each other. Whereas a lot of guys, they'll get to the front. They'll get there in 5 minutes, and then they'll look at the phone, make sure they got the address right, and then there's this come to Jesus moment where, am I going to do this super uncomfortable thing and be judged? I feel like I'm going to be judged going in. Or am I going to go be miserable for the rest of my life at home and keep doing what I've been doing? And so when I'm talking about prevention, intervention, when we're talking about putting money and creating policy for suicide, to help stop suicide, it needs to be in prevention. Crisis intervention is great. But we know, our data shows that when they can come to a space and they can start opening up comfortably and become vulnerable and start that reprogramming process that's just so heavy. It's so heavy and it's difficult that immediately these guys are showing a whole new outlook and purpose in life when they can do it with other bros who are just like them. Yeah.
I believe it.
Joe, I want to ask about, to kind of crystallize on this idea of the services that are available that the state has been working on, and other states as well, and the national government, very aggressively in recent years. And you mentioned earlier the 988 crisis line. I think I was back working at Salt Lake County when some of those conversations were starting, and seeing this through some of the work the private sector has done. So if you kind of look at the last handful of years, what Utah has done, other states have done, private sector has done, and what the federal government has done, and you start to list out things like 988 or increasing funding for mental health resources in some capacity, more funding for therapists. There's kind of the typical things that if you're a policymaker, if you're a state legislator or somebody who works in the space, hearing this, those are sort of the normal go-tos of, well, more funding for these kinds of official structures and programs. And I don't think any of that's bad. I think all of that's probably incredibly good and helpful and needed. But my question to you is, do those things still kind of miss something important? This kind of gets to your question, Beth, about the culture aspect of what you do, Joe. That is sort of maybe a better way to ask is the existing mental health infrastructure that we have and that we've been building up as a state and a nation. Are some elements of it just not well calibrated to helping the men who struggle? Yeah,
absolutely. I'm finding that. And then, again, I'm just a dude, a guy from an overpass. But I lean into that I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm a fairly astute when it comes to, emotional, emotions of others, I should say. And so as a normal guy, I Love You Bro Project was built off just a normal guy who helped another guy who saw a need and then created kind of simple, almost like much, much more simple than a lot of these other existing programs out there, and it's working for men. And so when you talk about the current model, yeah, I absolutely, I don't feel it's living up to close to what we're spending. The Utah is, in fact, we're ahead of the curve in a lot of ways when it comes to mental health. But when it comes to men's mental health, I'll put on a clinic for these, more corporate nonprofit who've been in the game for so long, because it's totally different. The marketing, the strategy for men is totally different. And so I'm not just talking about, we like what they're doing. Let's try to duplicate it. Let's put it. We'll have a room at every, government building and this in the county and for every city at the post, whatever. But once there is a lot of value in there not being a government. There's a lot of distrust, especially with men, with government. And so the idea that it's just this, again, hard hat, lunch bucket, front lines feels, it's just a guy, just an alcoholic who did this. If he can do it, then I can do it kind of feel. When you start attaching a government name or, a sponsorship, this is, the I Love You Bro Project, but now then we have all of these clinicians and other, that are kind of taking over the model of just simplicity.
Or even I Love You Bro by the Presbyterian Church.
Yeah, yes, exactly. That's why we don't have any groups in a church around here. We don't have them in any government building or office or school, nothing like that. It has to be, we have it in Spanish Fork, it's in a fella's barbershop basement, in West Jordan, it's in a real estate office. So to me, if I were to magnify or have the opportunity to make I Love You Bro statewide, nationwide, it would be using community partners like Fella's Barbershop. They're awesome. Like all these different businesses who want to get involved. If you want the community to start taking or having a say and start doing something, you have to get them freaking involved in this. And so I would still maintain our awesome, if I had a huge headquarters in Salt Lake City, for I Love You Bro, I would still want all of those community partners and have a group there and have them, they're the ones who are really helping us grow and getting the word out about I Love You Bro. While these guys are like, yeah, I'm just in the Fellas Barbershop. Yeah, I can open up here, I think, I'm not in a space where, where I take my kid to go to school, or things like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that they're doing now. We're in a lot of crisis intervention. We should be treating the seed, with fertilizer, the type of, the watering, all of the stuff that would make a lawn beautiful needs to be way before the weeds start coming. And the weeds have been coming, and we're doing our best to treat them, and I get it. But we need to throw the old book out, bro. I mean, I've been doing this long enough to know that the old, whatever they've been doing is not working, especially for men. So,
Joe, we're about at time. I want to ask you as we wrap up, if you were to give advice, let's maybe I want to first ask for public policymakers, for folks who work on this issue either as a legislator, as part of a state government entity, or kind of the professionals who do care deeply about reducing suicide and helping to bolster mental health and recognize the need to do that for men. So first that group, and then I also want to ask you just advice for men in general who might be struggling or feel a little bit adrift. So first, advice for policymakers. If you could sit down and talk to the entire legislature, the governor, Congress, kind of whatever level you think of, what's the one essential thing you would tell them? What's the one big thing they need to know?
So many, bro. There's so many out there. But the one thing that I would say for specific legislators who've been in the mental health arena, who've throw the book out, bro. Let's start from square one. We do have some great things that we're doing. I get that. But if we're talking about 80% of all suicides are men, so that means 80% of that funding should go to men's mental health to some extent. I mean, I'm not the smartest, but I think that math, it's not working out that way. The marketing should be different, but if I'm talking to a legislator face to face, we need to get back to just foundationally, we need connection. We need many connection and purpose. We need to find ways to give them those things in a very judgment-free, shame-free space. How can we do that? How can we facilitate those opportunities? We can't, of course, force people to go. We're an organization. I Love You Bro Project is an organization of invitation. So I will invite until these guys are blue in the freaking face, and then they finally show up and they're like, "Thanks for not giving up on me." We need to have that mentality. And I'll be that guy. I'll be that annoying dude who's like, "Hey, bro, I missed you last night. Why don't you come out? Why don't you come out?" We need to have guys need to be able to know that there's someone looking out for them. They need to know that there's someone who's missing them or missing their presence and the value that they bring. And that's our groups. When one of the guys isn't there, it's not the same, And not to say we want them in a perpetually, have to lean on continuously on our groups. It's not ever about that. We have, our education with our workshops and our clinical stuff that we do with legitimate. We're pairing clinicians with, the stuff that we're doing. Being an evidence-based organization, and using the data that we find, I mean, we're able to do all the stuff that I think has been successful while kind of reinventing, we have had to reinvent the wheel, bro. We have had to do it, It's round. We're finding that, we don't need to set it on fire, all the other stuff. What we're doing is working. And so when I'm talking to, these legislators, let's just get down. Let's get down to business. That Mulan song, cheesy, I know, but let's get down to business. This is what's working. Let's create spaces for guys. Let's make them super accessible. Let's make them free, and let's start inviting. And who better to do that than just beautifully broken dudes who are already out there, who are doing it with us. So that's what's worked for us, and I think it can work. Absolutely, will work everywhere. So
the last thing, very briefly, I want to ask: going into September, obviously it's Suicide Prevention Month in September. And if you're speaking to any men out there who may feel like they're struggling in any capacity, or if you're speaking to anyone, men or women, who have people in their lives that they want to make sure have great mental and emotional health and mental fitness, any advice for folks in either of those categories?
Yeah, for For the women, I'm with you. It can be so sad and frustrating to have men in your life who don't want to open up, or for some reason aren't opening up. It's a frustrating place to be. It's what I do now. It's the place I'm in a lot. But keep showing up for them. And I always tell, especially when it comes to women, the simple things that really help men it's never I love you, it's thank you. Thank you resonates more with men. Thank you for showing up for us. Thank you for all the hard work. My kid, when she gives a blessing on our food at home and she thanks, she's giving thanks for me and for the job that I have to make money. It resonates with me. And so I say for women, just keep reminding them of, we tie a lot to our work and what we do. We want to be good at what we do. So to have, reminders that, man, you're doing so awesome. I appreciate you showing up for us. It really resonates for men out there who are struggling. I feel you, bros. We're fighting for you, bros. Need you guys to fight too. Need you guys to keep showing up. You guys are always worth it. I don't care what kind of freaking job you got or how much money you don't make or how unattractive you think you are. Whatever the case, you are always freaking worth it. Keep showing up. We'll keep fighting for you guys. Our doors will always be open. In our groups, we recently had a guy come in who was suffering from suicide ideation, and he was so upset. And I looked around the room. We had about 12 guys, and I said, raise your hand if you've suffered from suicide ideation. And every single hand was raised. And that guy was able to see, not only, yes, I can hear, you are not alone. Reach out. That's men, that doesn't resonate with us. But when I can see, visually be in the presence and see 12 other dudes who are also suffering with something very similar that I am, that I don't want to live, and guess what? These guys have experienced that same feeling too. Then we're connecting at a level that we're not used to. It's uncomfortable and overwhelming. But show up for us, bros. Come be uncomfortable with us. I promise you, the best is yet to come. It really is. So come be uncomfortable with us, and just be around. We need you. So you keep fighting for yourself. You keep fighting for us, and we'll keep showing up for you guys. So, yeah.
We will leave it there. Joe Tuia'ana with the I Love You Bro Project. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us and for the work that you do.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
We're going to take one final break before we leave you with some final thoughts. Once again, this is Defending Ideas. Thanks for being with us, and we'll be right back.
Sometimes it's hard to keep up with the latest policy debate that affects your life. The solution? Subscribe to Sutherland Institute's weekly newsletter, where you'll find in-depth insights from seasoned policy experts, compelling multimedia, and advance notice of special events. Visit sutherlandinstitute.org.
Welcome back. Before we go, first, I want to thank Joe for coming on to share the amazing work that he's doing and his experiences, because I think it adds a human element to our ongoing discussion about the challenges impacting some men and boys in our society today. And that perspective is sorely needed. And to be honest, it's kind of hard to think of what to say to offer kind of a bookend to this conversation. How do we turn this into actionable talking points for you and I? Here's what comes to mind for me. It's normal for us to default to politics on issues like this. We instinctively reach for government and public policy solutions to big challenges like preventing suicide and improving mental health for men. And as I've said before, public policy can be part of the solution. However, we also need to realize that to truly fix a problem as big and nuanced as this, it's going to take much more than just public policy. It will take cultural and societal efforts, which means that you and I, acting through the institutions of civil society that we're part of, we need to take an active role. Local nonprofits, churches, businesses, community associations, families, and much more each need to feel a sense of ownership of this issue and be actively involved in the solutions. At the end of the day, Joe's experiences with the I Love You Bro project and the data we referenced in today's episode show that the men who struggle lack a sense of genuine connection and purpose in their communities and society as a whole. If a public policy failure didn't create that problem to begin with, it's unlikely that a public policy solution will be enough to fix it alone. As with any great modern challenge we're trying to solve, it'll take all hands on deck, which means you and I need to feel some ownership in our own spheres of influence. And I think these kinds of conversations we had today are going to help us do that. Well, that's it for this episode of Defending Ideas. If you enjoyed this discussion, please visit defendingideas.org, where you can access previous episodes and watch or listen on your favorite platform. Make sure to subscribe to Defending Ideas on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, wherever you like to get your shows. And make sure to share this episode on your own social media profiles or with anyone who you think might find it interesting. Lastly, if you want to support the broad work of Sutherland Institute, in particular, if you want more of these kinds of conversations, please make a contribution at sutherlandinstitute.org/donate. Thanks again for joining us on Defending Ideas from the Sutherland Institute in Salt Lake City. I'm Nic Dunn. We'll see you next time.